friend. Welcome to Wild and Waking, a sacred space for the woman unraveling what no longer fits, remembering the truth that's always lived inside her, reclaiming her joy, her voice, her power, and rising fully, fiercely, and without apology. I'm your host, Emily Rushell, and together we'll explore what it means to live in alignment, lead with soul, and awaken a life of abundance, authenticity, and purpose. Let's begin. Hi, friends. Welcome back to Wild and Waking. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to Arielle, author of the book Unfolding, and doer of so many things that I will let her give some context about. But it's so interesting. We connected over the past couple of weeks on Threads, which I feel like is how I'm starting every conversation. I just love that platform right now. And there's so many pieces of what we've been going through, our journeys that are same but different. So I'm excited to get to dig into a lot of what so many of us are navigating, but from her perspective. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For anyone getting to know you for the very first time, can you give us some context of who you are, where you are, and ultimately what brought you here today?
I love that. Who you are, where you are. Well, I'll go backwards. What brought me here was Threads. I think I had seen your post about podcast guests, and I'm in a season of trying to re-pitch / put myself out there. So I'm like, I feel like if I see it, I gotta respond to it. And you get hundreds of comments on posts like that. So I'm like, if they find me, amazing. If they see it and sift through this. So I love that so much. But yeah, and then where I'm at, I am an author, a poet, an actor. I say a drop down, multifaceted of a lot of different platforms. I mostly say multi-passionate. I feel very called into creative work and artistry work. And I always felt like, oh, does that put me in too many places and people don't know where to put me? And at the end of the day, I'm like, put me everywhere, put me in all of it that lights me up and that I feel called to do. And so I think my through line is, whether I'm on stage or in front of the camera, I say that I have words not for the ears, but for the soul. I want people to not just listen to me, but experience something. I often get the response, that people have an emotional reaction to interacting with me or my work. And I used to apologize for it. I stopped apologizing. And now I just say, thank you for letting me be part of your healing process. So I feel more like a conduit than the source itself. And I tie that to a lot of the work that I do. And yeah, I'm based in Los Angeles, and the acting kind of comes from I could do a commercial, but I also acting is where I started. Poetry is an extension of acting. I started there first, started writing there first, and then my own words kind of formed from that art form. And yeah, based in Los Angeles, California, born and raised, sunshine child through and through. I need the sun. I love a season for one quick Christmas. And then I'm like, get me to the sunshine and the beaches immediately. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and I'm married, got married in COVID, did one of those weddings, and I live a very full and multifaceted life.
I love that. And I feel like that's so relatable for some of the women listening. And it's such a human thing we try to do to define, who am I? What's the title? What's the one thing that I can claim where everyone's going to understand where I belong, right? I used to be an elementary school teacher, and that was easy. It was I said teacher, people knew what that meant. And now one of my favorite activities is listening to my husband try to describe what I do, because he's like, well, she does a little bit of this. She speaks, she has a podcast, she has these groups, she hosts retreats, and she's writing a book, and she's doing that. And I love it. I think that's the fun of it. And when you find the through line of what lights you up and the pace at which you can pour into so many things at once, there is no reality I can imagine outside of this now.
No, absolutely. And I'm I think there was a part of me that was always going to get here. Did I think that I would look a little bit more substantial or root, not substantial, but rooted, grounded in a thing. Absolutely. And I really fought for the one thing. I really did. I really wanted to just be like, I do this or I am this. And the more and more I kept doing this work, the more and more I kept becoming, the more I'm like, oh, I really am not meant to fit in this space. And I recently did my human design and I'm a reflector. And I was like, oh, I literally cannot give myself boxes. It does not work for how I'm meant to exist and show up in this world. And there was this movie I had seen recently, and there's a Walt Whitman poem / quote that said, "Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contain multitudes." And that has been my through line this last year of like, I contain multitudes. They're what boxes? Boxes don't serve. Boxes don't flourish me. I get to be all of it and more. And what a gift.
Yeah. Which I really feel like is the perfect segue to the unfolding. And I would
Mm,
love if you could walk us through not even just the book itself, but your own journey of really recognizing and deconstructing and breaking
yeah.
through these prescribed boxes, these identities, these ways of being, these expected ways to show up in the world. Because that's where a lot of the women in this community are, is like really looking in the mirror, doing the identity work, untangling worldviews and religion, politics, like identity, like who they should be, everything and beyond, and like going through that messy evolution of what is truth, who am I before the world told me to be, and how do I put this all back together? So I would love for you to just walk us through that whole journey.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is women in general, women identifying people, just women who have constantly been put in boxes. There was this mission. I think if we can get women to forget who they are, then we can get them to do a lot of things. And I think that unfortunately was a lot of the root of our conditioning. That was the root of if we can get them to make themselves small, to wear imposter syndrome like it's a coat, if we can get them to doubt their voices and their knowing and distrust the very thing that guides them, oh my gosh, there's so many options. And then on the opposite of that is once we tap into that, and it makes me think of, once women did tap into that, they were put in mental health hospitals. They were deemed crazy. They were deemed witches. They were deemed these other things because the conditioning stopped working. And that has been proof in centuries and hundreds of years of women finding themselves and then being made to be the other. And I remember reading this book that was basically debunking and dismantling the good girl trope or even the trope of women being the problem for things. So you look at mythology, you look at different stories where women are or the downfall of humanity. Women, Pandora's box unleashed all these things. But what if the narrative was actually, it was just women waking up and truth came out? And so for my own process, it was a very similar thing where I started to feel like these boxes that I was put in didn't fit, didn't feel right, for some reason, as we're having this conversation right now, I imagine all of us, walking, our arms are out, our heads are out, and our feet are out, but there are boxes across our shoulders that go down to our waist, our knees, and underneath, though, are these beautiful flourish lace and colors and tulle and all this brightness and vibrantness. And I think we just got to the point where it's like the box is clunky. I don't move fluidly. I don't move authentically. I'm just operating in this weird shape that isn't me. And we just started to be like, well, what if I took it off? And it's so scary because when we say that, we're like, what if I don't belong anymore because I'm not the person that my belonging is tied to? Am I still then worthy of love and belonging? And oftentimes the answer is always yes, but it's just a matter of where we are belonging in the first place and how conditional is that belonging. And so for my own self, I just started being like, I'm in so many boxes and it feels so clunky. And I just feel like I can't breathe anymore. For me, it was, I can't breathe. I feel like I have been holding my breath, waiting for the applause, waiting for the yes, waiting to be the good daughter, the good leader, the good whatever. And I'm tired and I can't hear myself. And that is a lot of the journey of unfolding for me, was just undoing the oldest child, undoing the being the example, undoing the pastor's kid, undoing all of that. And then I'm like, if I take all that away, who am I actually? Who am I really? Like, what is the actual essence of Arielle Estoria Lita, and who comes forward? And Arielle means lioness of God. And my name meaning has always been given to me as somewhat a reminder and a threat of, like, the Lion King, remember who you are. And the more I started to tap into what that actually meant for me, of remembering who I am, to be a lioness means I'm not biting my tongue. I'm not operating out of nicety. I'm not saying the pleasing or approachable thing just to keep the conditional belonging. And once I started to just start peeling each of those little things away, it got to the point where I was like, oh, I might be a whole different person than the person who's, belonging based off of this conditioning. And yet, the idea of the unfolding is that as we peel back those layers, that there's this little bloom, there's this little core existence that has always been there. But we start shedding, we start removing the parts of us that don't serve anymore, that were just there because we were told they had to be there. And yeah, and it's a constant journey. I feel like I'm back in a whole nother unfolding all over again. I say in the book, it's not cyclical. You could be experiencing all the phases at once and in different times, and then again. And I think we do that until we are not here anymore to do that. And it's a gift to be able to unfold again and again and again until we're not here to unfold anymore.
Yeah, we've been having this conversation in one of my group programs about how, we go through a journey like this. Your process is called the unfolding, mine's the wild and waking journey. And it's like sometimes you're going through these phases in like a seasonal arc. And sometimes it's like in a month in your literal cycle. Sometimes it's in a week, and sometimes it's within an hour, and all at once. Like, where am I, unraveling? How am I reclaiming? Like, who am I? And also, I know for me, a lot of this has been grief, when
Yeah.
you're doing this deep identity work, and so much of it is tethered to your upbringing, to your faith, to your family, to like everything that felt so concrete and true. And once you start the path of asking questions and like
Hmm.
sitting in the discomfort of the unknown, it's
Hmm.
very jarring.
Yes, I talk about that in the crossover of the awakening to the eclipsing, right? The awakening is like that moment. I like using the example of, like, when you take like a really juicy, really good afternoon nap, and you wake up from that nap and it might still be daylight outside, or it might be nearing the evening, and you're like so disoriented. You're like, who am I? Where am I? They're still president? Like, what year is it? Just like all of that. And then that leading into the eclipsing, which is the shadowy season. And we love to glorify and, bloom and grow, but we don't really talk a lot about how painful it is to actually do that. We don't talk about the grief of, I miss how naive I was. I miss the sweet, sweet girl who just didn't know. I miss blindly just doing things because I'm like, yes, I got you. I'm a nice person. Am I good? Am I pleasing? I miss operating out of that sometimes. And yet I would never, ever, 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 ever put myself back. I would never, ever go back to that. I've done too much work. I've seen too much, to go back to that. But it does not negate the very real reality of, like, oh, Man, I just miss what I didn't know. You know,
Yeah. It's
I
like the
miss what
more I learn, the less I know.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. And I miss how people interacted with me when I was that version of myself. I miss the ease of not seeing the things people weren't saying. I do miss that. And yet I would never put myself back, ever, but it is a grieving process, and give yourself grace for it. Give yourself time to acknowledge all that. Like, I'm not who I was. There's a grieving with that. When we lose, we grieve. That also comes with parts of ourselves that we lose, where you're like, oh, not just weight loss, not just like when I was in my skinny 20s. You're like, not just that. We grieve the people that we were, and yet we celebrate who we're becoming at the same time.
Okay, you briefly started to touch on the awakening and the eclipsing. Would you walk us through the 5 phases and what
Yeah,
they mean to you and maybe what they represented at the time that you wrote the book? And perhaps I'm sure, like we said, this is like an ongoing cycle. So maybe what are you
100%.
moving through now in these areas?
Yeah. So the awakening, which is, like I said, that waking up, it's that, oh, shoot, you look in the mirror and you're like, I'm a different person. I'm still me, but there's something different. There's something new here. And then that reorienting that comes, that refamiliarizing that comes with that awakening. Then you get to the eclipsing. And, I say the shadow selves kind of like passing over. And that's the space to kind of decide, like, oh, I'm not that anymore. And I'm going to grieve that. I'm going to sit with that. And then the mending. And the mending is now I get to decide who is me? What is me? Like, okay, that was a part of me, and I still really appreciate that part of me. I still really love that part, how I see the world, how I showed up. I think for me, it's like I grew up really evangelical, and there's still a part of me that, like, will 100% still have an Ocean's moment in my car, because that is just like who I am. And music still feels very spiritual for me. And I was like, I'm going to keep that because that still feels like me, even though I've undone how I perceive it and how I walk through it. And I use the example of kintsugi, which is the Japanese art form of taking broken pieces and putting it back together. So clay pots, clay bowls, cups, and things like that. And you bring it back together with this gold glue. So you see where it was broken, and yet it's still whole. And from the mending, then we get into the 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Then we get into the illuminating. I'm so sorry. The illuminating. And the illuminating is, I love light analogies. I love like the light leaking in through the windows at a certain time. I love the idea of dancing in the light. So now in the illuminating, we get to dance in the fullness of who we say we are, not who we've been told to be, not how we've been told to operate. And then the returning. And the returning, I'm like, my favorite poem in the returning is, oh, there I am, and there I've always been. Because even though we're returning to this quote unquote new version of ourselves, I think it's more so we're returning to what was already there. The trusting, the knowing, the full awareness of who I've always been. I, as a little girl, I would be on any platform possible, a staircase, a little elevated stair, a little elevated stage, and a boa and a feather microphone. And I'm like, that little person knew exactly who we were going to be, knew exactly who we were going to unfold into. And I often feel like I'm just returning to her more often than not. I'm just returning to that girl who walked into a room. Every family video is, Daddy, look at me, Daddy, look at me, Daddy, look at me. I'm leaning into I love layers and colors and being not necessarily the center of attention, but being the light I've always known I was meant to be. And the returning is just that exhale of like, oh, this has been me. And now I get to move in that. But again, we do that all over again. My own awakening, eclipsing has just been like, no, you've always said the nice thing to keep the peace. You've always said the thing people want to hear. And now I'm in a season where I'm having to say things with my whole chest. And I've been writing a lot of poems around that right now, is just like, what does it mean to speak with my whole chest? To say the truth part out loud and not be so people pleased, suffocated by how it's going to land and what it's going to look like. And getting back to that return of like, no, words and communication has always been my strong suit and my gifting. And I have bit my tongue too long to know that or to remember that. And now I'm back in that assertiveness, not for aggressiveness, but like, I know what I'm talking about. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not wrong, and really leaning into that space and that knowing of like, I am a great communicator. I've always been a great communicator. I've just always said the nice or pleasing thing. And Dr. Tama Bryant has, a quote. She says, they told you to keep the peace, but whose peace was it keeping? And a lot of us are peacekeepers for peace that is actually not for us to ever experience, but we've been told and conditioned to be the peacekeepers until we realize this keeping of the peace is actually keeping me suffocated and I cannot hold it anymore.
Well, and I feel like we're experiencing that on a collective level right now. This like tiptoeing around the ideas, tiptoeing around the truth, like politeness and niceties. And I think in real time, I would love your perspective on this. Like, we're seeing kind of this implosion of like, oh, you really said that with your whole chest,
Yeah.
right? Wrong or indifferent. And I think it's amazing the way that like women are stepping up to say what hasn't been said. But it's a weird time to exist in the world right now.
It's a very strange, and we're all feeling it. I'm like, please, just change the script. New year, please. Let's just start over again. But at the same time, I do think a lot of those are uprooting things. I think COVID was a lot of that too, is like, we have to make sure we know what's in our soil. Otherwise we can't keep growing here and we won't keep growing here. So it's a lot of the uprooting. It's a lot of the retending to and being like, oh, no, that's not good. Actually, that needs to be removed. And then there's a lot of like, hey, no one's saying that this weed is here, but it's here and it's been here.
And it's always been here.
And it's always been here. And so, yeah, definitely we're seeing a lot of that. And there is nuance with that. There is a lot of areas where you're like, okay, not everything needs to be said, but maybe for a season it does because we spent so long not saying it.
Yeah. I would be interested, as you went through like this really big unfolding. And I know in the book you talk a lot about specifically with your faith, and a lot of women in my community are navigating that too, and really wrestling with or drowning in or at least navigating other people's expectations, right? Whether
Absolutely.
it's family,
Yeah.
in-laws, community at large, especially when so much of that is like integrated in community and
Mhm.
groupthink belief systems. What
Mhm.
did that process look like for you? And what advice would you give someone who is, whether in that department or elsewhere, doing that kind of identity work where in addition to their own journey, they're also trying to manage the relationships along the way?
Yeah, I don't know why, but the first thing that is coming to mind is like the reality is it might feel like everyone needs you, but you need you too. And I needed to come back to that for myself. Like, oh, I get to need me too. Like I get to have that for myself as well. And as much as it is a reintroduction to yourself, it's also a reintroducing to these people who have known you in one set of ways. And I have constantly had to reintroduce myself to the people around me, and it is scary and jarring and a little uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, the people who love you and who see you will stay for all the versions of you. And I think finding and meeting my husband, we were both very at the time like, all right, this is me, like all exposed. Here's the fullness of it. And it was kind of like we were testing each other, like, are you going to run? Like, are you going to run? And neither one of us ran. And it was just such a beautiful example of like, oh, how often or where else can we have those relationships with people where it's like, here's all of me in this moment, and be willing to stay and watch as the person grows. I'm friends with people that I met in high school. We are not the same people. We are not the same people than when we met. And yet I'm like, it's almost like this fun thing where it's like, oh, I get to learn this version of you now. I get to love this version of yourself now. And it is hard because there may be people who are not growing as much because they don't want to for whatever reason. I know in a lot of faith and religious spaces, it's like, nope, this is who I am and this is who I'm going to be because I'm tried and true because God is tried and true. But that limits the human experience. And I had someone in my family ask me, well, when do we stop unfolding? And I said, when we die,
Yeah.
when we are not here to do it anymore, because is that not life itself? Seasons, like we literally duplicate and reflect nature. These are not the same leaves that were on the tree last year. So why would I hold you as a constant changing person to be the same from last year when I'm not the same from last year? And our molecule makeup changes every few seconds. So internally, we are constantly evolving. Why would we not give ourselves that same space and grace? And it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of like vulnerability. This is who is standing before you today. If you are telling me that you cannot love this version of myself, okay, thank you for removing yourself for someone who will. And again, the loss, the grief, there was a lot of that. I cried so much throughout this season of writing the book, but I do feel like I'm able to experience this version of my unfolding a lot more gracefully because I know now the other side of how hard it is so worth it. It's so hard, yes, and it's so worth it. Did I wish it could have been a little easier? 100%. Do I wish I could have cried less and had less panic attacks? Absolutely. And yet, I'm through. I'm through and I'm going through again, because this is life. This is the human experience and we cannot run from it. We can try for so long until we can't. And so just being willing to have the hard conversations, it still makes my stomach hurt. I don't like having hard conversations. I don't like confronting, and yet it is a must. We must.
Yeah. I remember several years ago, I was in the thick of a therapy journey for the first time and just really going through it. And I asked my therapist, I'm like, this sucks. Are less self-aware people happier? Because I'm not sure that this is great. And she kind of laughed and she was like, I'm not going to lie. Yes. Like there is something to be said for choosing, to be naive and like not look in the mirror and just continue going, through life, not really doing the internal work or considering an evolved perspective or, you know, evolving your worldview. But she was like, but those are the people at the end of life who are filled with regret, who just can't stop thinking about everything they didn't do or they didn't say or they didn't try. And so she was like, yeah, this is brutal. And also, it's the beauty of being alive. And the people who are willing to walk through the darkness and who are willing to go through the messy seasons and untangle and be introspective and have the hard conversations and take the risks, like that builds the life that feels so fruitful and fulfilling because you're doing it with intention and you know that you're choosing every step of the way.
Yes. And you can say, I tried. I tried. I did it. It was hard. Being able to say that will not weigh on us as much as, I don't know, I didn't give myself the chance. I didn't allow myself the permission to grow. And who could I have been if I had?
Well, and I think that going through a journey like this ultimately builds like really unshakable self-trust. because you have truly sat with and walked yourself through, whether you call it the shadow, the darkness, the depths. And I think, a lot of women crave the confidence that's really actually the underlying surface of knowing, loving, and trusting yourself. And when you're willing to go through this journey of evolution and letting these old pieces of yourself, fall away and being able to really remember and reclaim who you are and then rise to what you're being pulled forward towards, like you move through that with such a deeper relationship with self where, the confidence isn't something you're trying to grasp or fabricate. It's just there because you have to become so rooted and grounded in who you are after going through that journey of being like, this is me. And the people in my life who love me for me are here. But I'm no longer sacrificing the pieces of myself for, like you said, conditional approval.
Right. And it's there and it's a muscle. So confidence is not a thing where you're like, okay, well, let me just duplicate what I see so and so is doing. The confidence comes from having to do it over and over and over and over again. So then it stops becoming a thing you have to try to do and a thing you just are, right? Like I just am this now because of those trying muscle moments that you had to build and you had to work it and it was uncomfy. But then the next time you do it, there's a lot more ease. It still might be hard, but it's a little easier than it was the time before. And constantly being able to get that muscle exercise. So then it just becomes part of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then when things, when you're brushing up the edge of your comfort zone for whatever reason, maybe something that someone said, an opportunity that comes up, something that you read that you're like, ooh, I'm not sure how I feel about that. You can, in my experience, then have the ability to move through that with ease without immediately getting into this like defensive or really shaken state of being. And you can like cycle through phases like this, seasons like this, journeys like this with more neutrality and ease. It doesn't
Yeah,
feel so jarring.
exactly. Exactly.
What are some of the greatest things you learned about yourself navigating journeys like this?
I learned how resilient I am and a resilience in a sense of like you look back at things and you're like, wow, you have the viewpoint and the realization to be like, that could have really broken me and I didn't let it, you know, like that really could have made me because the reality is you could stay in fear. You could decide, I don't want to grow like that. You could decide I don't wanna do that. You very well could decide those things, and in the midst of the fear, in the midst of how hard it is, you would be like, "And I wouldn't blame you," like, it's not fun, and so I look back at, myself in that, and I'm like, "I'm so proud of you now then for being able to navigate through that and to work through that." I learned about, just I think more of myself. I don't think I would have tapped into being able to dive more into like, "Oh, I'm a reflector." That makes so much sense in different parts of my life where I was just always mirroring people and not being fully myself. And that's okay, like that not having this concrete necessarily for me of like this is who I am because I get to be the multitudes. There's so much release and exhale I have and permission I've been able to give myself because of that. And I realized I think I became a better artist from it. The unfolding really stretched me because I was so good at being vulnerable with still this extension, this distance to what I actually to being actually naked. I was really good at prosing vulnerability without fully being, completely exposed. And I had to expose myself in that book. And that was not fun. I did not want to do it. The first couple drafts were exactly that. And my editor was like, she literally told me like, I can feel you holding back. I can read you not saying the whole thing. And I'm like, oh, I can't just make it cute. Like I can't just make this, like a little, and then I tied a little bow and there we go. She's like, no. And I understand that we're asking you to go first, but somebody has to. And I realized that a lot in a lot of my life and a lot of my spaces of always being told, like, you're a leader, you paved the way. And I'm like, I don't want to. I want to walk a paved path, but I don't, I actually really don't, and really embracing and learning those aspects about myself. And ultimately, it's like what I learned, but also the permission slips I gave myself along the way. I really needed in order to just be like, keep becoming. Yep. Yep. Keep going that route. Yeah, absolutely. Keep being this version of you till you get to the point where you're like, I love who I am. Life might not be great. Things might be going who I am, going this and that, but I so value and love who I've become and the version of myself that I've become. And I cannot wait to see all the versions of myself that I become.
Yes. I think that's such an important point, is like going through a journey like this for me has like reduced the expectation that I ever have to have it figured out, which we put so much pressure on young people, right? What do you want to be when you grow up? What are you going to major in? Where are you going to get a job? And it's like, I hope that my work looks so drastically different 5 years from now because I've lived so many lifetimes and good. Like, I hope that people listen to interviews that I'm doing in 2025 and go, oh, wow, like that's so different, right? And it just gives us permission to play and to explore and be curious and be messy because we are always meant to be evolving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so fun too to be able to look back and be like, oh wow. Remember when, like remember when that was part of us? Remember when we did that and we just didn't know? And I think it's part of the life we get to be able to look back and say, I lived. Like I lived all its fullness and all its hard and all its grief and all its loss and all its beauty. I lived.
Oh, that's like the mic drop right there. Well, I feel like that was a perfect segue into, as a multi-passionate creative, I would be so interested. What are you working on in the next year or so?
Yeah, so I'm trying to work on a piece. I want just a book of poems. I don't want to essay them. I don't want to explain them. I don't want to guide people through it. I just want to write a book of poems. So I'm in that process now. And there was a title, I thought, and as of this week, as I've been writing more pieces around it, I don't know if that's actually the title. So I'm watching it unfold, no pun intended, in real life. And it's really exciting. But yeah, my goal is just a full collection of just poems, just words and prose and things off the top of my head, and have it be a through line of something, a continuation, I think, of this, but at the same time, something entirely different. And my literary agent this week told me that I've been speaking about my whole chest, but I haven't been writing with my whole chest. And that was the poem I wrote Wednesday. So I'm really excited of I'm just in that space right now, and then actively trying to, I feel like I've reached a really beautiful full circle moment with myself as a poet. And I really want to give honor and give space for myself as an actor. I love storytelling. I love being other people. I love playing and being in front of the camera. And so I've been trying to pour more into that as well. But yeah, I think I work in project space, which is not very typical for a lot of artists, but I can't move on from a thing until I've finished this thing that feels like it's sitting on me. So the unfolding was the same way. The unfolding album, or the art of unfolding album, was the next thing. And now it's this prayer for the church girl extension that I'm trying to unfold and figure out.
Okay, for anyone listening who wants to get connected with you and your work, can you tell us more about where we can find you and get connected?
Absolutely. You can find the book, The Unfolding, wherever you purchase books, audiobook as well. It's on Audible, but it's also on Libro FM. which is like an Audible library extension. It's also in Barnes and Nobles and things like that, but try your local bookstore. If your local bookstore doesn't have it, tell them to get it so that it can be in a local bookstore. And The Art of Unfolding is wherever you listen to music. Like I said, there's some poems on there that are from the book, but they're to music. They just sit in a different space. And then also because I was constantly unfolding, there's a continuation of those poems as well. You can find me on socials, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, kind of, just Arielle Estoria. That's 2 L's and an E. And I do respond to my DMs on Instagram. That is me. I do not have someone run it. It feels too personal for that. So you can find me on there as well. And if you'd like to book me for an event or a conference, you can find arielleestoria.com.
Wonderful. And you have, man, I was on your website today. I'm like, dang, you've had some really big stages.
Yeah, that's been very fun. I'm very, very thankful for just the different opportunities and the different spaces and conversations I've been able to have over the last, 10 plus years, which is really wild. Yeah.
So cool. Okay, last question I ask everyone who comes on the show. What does growth look like for you in this season?
Growth for me looks like, I feel like I'm really in a garden season in a sense of like we're talking about our past selves, right? And so I think there's like a new bloom of me that's kind of like looking back to all the tethering, all the soiling I've already done. And there's been things that have bloomed up from that. But I think I'm really moving forward and I'm becoming a new bloom and also watching this new season kind of unfold in front of me, which is really beautiful and really scary because I don't fully know what that means or what that looks like. But I think I'm just a little halfway bloomed, a little blossom, just kind of swaying in the wind, trying to figure out what's coming next.
I love that. And I think I identify with that so much of being in a place of knowing that something is unfolding and that it's meant to come when it's supposed to. And for me, for the first time, not being in a hurry to try to rush or figure it out.
No, so much ease. It's gonna unfold when it's gonna unfold. And I can't do anything but stress myself out, try to
Mhm.
control that process. So I might as well just sit in it. I might as well just find ease in it where I can.
Mm, that's such good advice because I know I personally have been through seasons where I'm like, okay, something's coming. I got to figure it out. Like, what is the thing? Like, I'm looking through the fog. I just want clarity and then I can do it. And it's like, no, just continue to do the work, keep taking steps, keep coming home to yourself, and everything will make sense when it's supposed to.
It'll reveal when it reveals. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I loved this conversation.
Oh, me too. There's so much I identify with in your journey and story. So thank you
Mm,
for sharing your heart and your vulnerability and your perspective. And for anyone listening, really, truly go order this book. It's a very easy, quick read, and it's like physically a beautiful book also.
it is. It is
Major
beautiful.
compliments on that.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted it to be like an aesthetic. I think that's the Libra in me that's always like beauty. I'm like, it looks great on your coffee table. It's a really cute
Yes.
gift. It's a great thing to have, but it's also hopefully a nourishing thing to read at the same
It
time.
is. I loved just the rhythm of having like the personal stories, kind of the
Mm,
takeaways, the reflection questions, and then also the invitation to go deeper through
yeah.
poetry that is both simple and complex, like
Thank you.
beautiful and resonant. I really, really enjoyed reading it this week. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Hey, friend, I hope this conversation sparked something real in you, something that feels like truth, curiosity, or the courage to keep becoming. If this episode resonated, I'd love for you to share it. Take a screenshot, post it to your stories, or send it to one of your friends. You can always find me over on Instagram at Emily Rushel, where I love continuing these conversations and hearing your takeaways. Truly, your DMs are one of my favorite parts of podcasting, so don't be shy. I'd love to reflect and connect with you over there. I'm so grateful to be surrounded by a community of women who ask hard questions, sit in the discomfort of the unknown, blaze new paths forward, and ultimately come home to their wild and waking selves. See you next week.